Welcome. This episode is called Healing the Shame Blanket. Before I go into explaining what the shame blanket is, I want to first start off by allowing ourselves to arrive here in this present moment. Let's take a few deep breaths as we gather ourselves into this present moment, feeling the power of your seat, your sit bones connected to your seat, and your soul taking a deep seat in your body. As your grounding cord, this tree trunk like image connects from the base of your body, your sit bones, your hips, and extends deep, deep, deep into the earth, tethering you and us here to the earth and to this present moment. May light surround you and light surround myself. May we receive the light through a waterfall of grace, through the crown of our heads. May it wash away anything that you don't need to be carrying in this moment. And may it support you in being here, ready and able to receive what you are here to receive through this episode today. I pray that we have a blessed and connected and supportive time in this session. Thank you, God. So be it, and so it is. So, welcome, everyone. I like to do an opening to help us arrive here energetically in our time together. So, thank you for joining that opening. This topic today, I refer to it as the shame blanket, and essentially it's shame. So I wanted to start off by saying that, obviously, Brene Brown, a researcher and writer, has done an extensive amount of research and talks and writing and education on shame, and has really brought it to the foreground on a mainstream level, and very, 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 very important and critical work. And I wanted to bring an angle in on shame from an energetic perspective, because it's actually very, very connected to a particular power center in our body, a particular chakra in our body that carries historically shame. And that chakra is our second chakra. It's located in the pelvis. It's a power center that it governs our sensuality, our creativity, our feminine energy, our sexuality, our emotions, our ability to be vulnerable. It's the power center that allows us to soften into ourselves and be real with how we feel. It's the creative energy, it's the intuitive sense of being able to feel what's beneath the table. But it also becomes the power center when it's out of balance or when we're carrying a lot of wounds in that area of our body. It's the power center where we house shame. And out of that comes the squashing of self and patterns like over caretaking and codependency and peacekeeping and so many more things. So I want to unpack this a little bit, and I'll explain why I call it the shame blanket. So shame, it serves its purpose in that it is the experience that we have that tells us that there is some part of us that is in some ways contracted or squashed. We feel shame when there is an experience internally of being bad and wrong. And we can trace that back sometimes to some of our early childhood conditioning. Like, you're not a good person if you tell everybody what the family's, share the family secrets, or you're not a good person if you express your emotions. Children are meant to be seen, not heard. When we start to get these very early childhood messages, verbal and nonverbal, about how we are supposed to be existing inside ourselves that seem contrary to our innate nature, we're essentially going to feel some element of bad and wrong, particularly if what we got was shaming. I'm shaming, like the information was shaming and blaming, that the teachings of the family of origin, was had an element of shame. You are bad and wrong. And sometimes shame serves that purpose of bonding us to that tribe or that family of origin, or the system that we were raised in. And so um, we can certainly have internalized the shaming and the bad and wrong and the blame and the projection to a point where, if I am getting that this isn't okay and this is bad, then I must be bad. I must not be okay. And so shame, the experience of feeling it as an adult points to that there's some part of us that ultimately the deeper essence was not allowed to be who we were here to be. It's not allowed to be authentic. There's some element of contraction, squashing, hiding, suppression of self, truth, deeper self inside ourselves. And we live with that as a part in many ways. There might be from the heart upward, we're adults. We have, we move through life, we understand things, we're conscious on many levels, but there's a part of us, younger, that's operating with the consciousness that there is a squashing, a suppression of self. And that is a deeper truth that is underneath the blanket of shame. Shame is the energy that pushes that energy down, that deeper suppression of self. So, shame oftentimes relates to, specifically, it can relate to emotions. We can receive the imprinting very early on in our life that it's not okay for us to feel feelings. And we can learn this in our own childhood. It also can be downloaded intergenerationally. It can come through the family line. In this family, this is how women operate. In this family, this is how men operate. Men are not to feel their feelings, they are to man up. Women are not to express their anger, they're supposed to be good girls. This is sort of conditioning that comes through the construct, the bloodline intergenerationally. It's also in our societal expectations. So when we are young and we're developing relationship to our own emotions, but we're told our emotions are wrong or bad and wrong on some level, then what can happen is, in order for us to access a deeper feeling inside ourselves, we have to feel shame first. And that's the shame blanket. I need to feel the shame of this anger or this grief that I'm feeling. I'm sorry, I'm crying. I feel bad that I got so angry. When we haven't been taught how to have emotions. We haven't been taught that they're okay to have, that they are normal, and that it's necessary for us to process those feelings, and we need to be able to access vulnerability to feel those feelings. Then we are sitting either above the shame blanket, or we have to go through the shame blanket to access those feelings. This is this is an experience that happens particularly in energy healing, and when we are and in personal process, when we are processing our history and really looking the at where, it's basically the pathway to authenticity inside ourselves. Means we have to start feeling how we feel, but we have to feel the shame first. But what happens if the shame you're carrying is on a chakra level? And what I mean by that is our chakras carry information that is historic. And that information can be historic to your human experience in this life, meaning your childhood, or that information can be energy you've come into this world with. It can be what your soul carries. It can be also intergenerational, as I mentioned, that the second chakra area of our body is the feminine power center of our body, no matter your gender. We all have masculine energy and feminine energy. The feminine energy is the intuitive, the subtle. It's the very in tuned, and the ability to be with the emotions, to feel them, to express them, to have that emotional intelligence, to be vulnerable, etc. Historically speaking, in the second chakra, we carry the history of wounds, of shame to the feminine. We carry the imprint on a collective level and very personal level of how we are to be in relationship with our feminine, which ultimately in many ways has been wounded or disempowered. And what that might look like is that we have been told, and this is across the board, no matter our gender, that our intuition isn't something to trust. We need to trust reason. We shouldn't follow how we feel. We should listen to what makes sense. We shouldn't feel our feelings. We should keep it together and carry on. We shouldn't eh, trust our creativity. Our creativity is never going to pay the bills. The messaging goes on and on, particularly also for men being told, like I said, to man up or toughen up, that they're not supposed to be in relationship with their emotions or their vulnerability. They need to, man up. Those messages that we've received on a very deep level has been stored and impacted within the second chakra consciousness of our being. Also, collectively and historically, we have had suppression of women. We've had cultural suppression and oppression. We have experienced, people in general have. We have, again, the we is collective and people and wounds to the second chakra. We've experienced the patriarchy and the patriarchal impact of oppression of the feminine and the threat of the feminine. So let me dominate, let me control, and let me suppress the feminine. And the feminine includes not just women, the feminine includes all cultures, race, genders. It includes anything other than the white patriarchal male on the extreme wounded level. I want to be clear. I'm talking about a high wounded masculine, not that all masculine is wounded. We have a healthy masculine also. But in the system, in the energetic body, we carry immense wounding historically to the second chakra that ultimately our spirit has been shamed out of the second chakra. We've been shamed out of our own sexuality, out of our own, our own ability to feel authentically how we feel. We've been energetically pushed out of this area of the body. And the result of that, of the soul saying, well, I'm not allowed to be in here because, society and religion and such says that this is a shameful area of my energy body, the soul starts to either lift up out of that area or move back. And the result is that this power center has to keep going. And so what it ends up doing is starts to feel what everybody else needs. It starts to over caretake. It starts to intuit into the needs of other people. And we begin to prioritize what other people need, and we begin to become powerless in this area of the body. And in that powerlessness, we become victimized. And that victimization that occurs here is in combination with shame in the body, starts to put us in relationship with others from a place of powerlessness, from a place of codependency, from a place of hypervigilance or people pleasing or taking care of other people. We start to operate from the wounded feminine. And the wounded feminine is the victim. The wounded feminine is, I am not in my power, in my sense of self, in being real with how I feel, in being authentic, in being connected to my emotions. Instead, I am under the shame blanket, hiding and squashed and victimized. And I'm operating from that victimized consciousness in my body. And I cannot succeed in feeling any level of equilibrium or any level of power inside myself because it wasn't modeled for me, because I was raised in a system that dominated, and because culturally or on a family level or whatever the system is, this is how I need to live in this way in my body, because this is how I need to survive in this system for me to live this way in my body, for me to feel squashed on some level, for me to live under the shame blanket, for me to fragment from my deepest, truest truth. And when we fragment from that place, when we, on a soul level, literally, it's like the soul doesn't occupy that area of the body, we start to lose connection to ourself. And sometimes acting out happens. Sometimes that means drugs. Sometimes that means sex. And I mean sex on a vice level. Sometimes we harm ourselves through addiction. Sometimes we act out in relationships. We project. We begin to shame and blame other people. Sometimes we learn to not take responsibility for whatever our actions are, because ultimately this area, the feminine power center, is wounded. It's living underneath, it's living in the consciousness of shame underneath a shame blanket. And the true self has stepped out. And the true self steps out ultimately to preserve itself until later, until it's time, until you've experienced enough healing, until you've had enough of self injury, until it's hurt too much, until you've evolved in consciousness, until you've found yourself, until you've understood the power of you and your worthiness and your truth, and that vulnerability isn't weakness, and that the power of your faith, your vulnerability, your self compassion steps you back in to the second chakra area of the body and says, this is a power center. It's not a shame center. You know, ultimately, in many ways, it's almost as if you were raised in cultures where sexuality was shamed. It's almost as if God was shamed out of this area of your body, like it's a dirty area of your body. And out of that, when we cannot bring the light into this area of our body, we start to develop dis-ease in that area. Symptoms start to happen. You know, in this area, when we're holding a collective amount of our history from this lifetime, and even the collective throughout time of wounds to the feminine, when we hold that unhealed in this area of our body, we have symptoms ensue in that area. And so it's so important that we when we're approaching the healing process of shame, that we do understand that there's a practice of embracing vulnerability and being real with how we feel, but that is combined with an energetic experience of reclaiming the second chakra in the pelvis as a place of power. And that power is softness, it is listening, it is vulnerability, it is the tears, it is the rage sometimes, if it's coming from a place of truth or anger inside ourselves, and letting us have our feelings, not shaming ourselves for having the feelings, but it is allowing for us to feel and process and be able to go with the flow. The feminine, in many ways, in all of us, is it's the permission to rest. It's the introverted nature. It's going inward. It's being honest with how we feel and not having to give somebody a line or a story or show up in the way other people need us to show up. You know, it's being real and authentic with who we are and how we feel, but energetically on a soul level. And you can do this even as I say it. It's time to step in and take a big step in to that second chakra area and sit down into that area and claim it as your power center for truth, for being able to feel beneath the surface, for being creative, for trusting your creative flow and being in alignment and co-creation with the universe, with the divine. We can't do that always from rationale or from the upper chakras or from pushing. You know, the masculine energy in us pushes. We need that. It's productive. It makes things happen. It gets us out there. It's manifesting. We need that too. But if it's always pushing and always trying to make things happen without the feminine saying, ooh, let's think about this. Let's sit and allow for the timing to unfold. Let's feel this through and allow the flow to happen. And it'll happen. That's the feminine. That's the power of the second chakra. There's so much to say about the second chakra. But what I want to add here in terms of the shame blanket is that when you heal and connect to this power center as power and give yourself permission, no matter your gender, to have feminine energy inside yourself, the blanket of shame starts to move on its own. We begin to build authenticity inside ourselves to where every time we have vulnerability or a feeling, we don't have to pass through the barrier of shame the corridor of shame to get down to it. You don't feel the contraction and the nervous system and the response in the body to get down to it. Instead, we might feel a little shame. It's human, but we get to the feeling, and there's an easier access to self compassion. It's okay. Okay, I screwed up. I messed up. I understand I made a mistake. I'm going to apologize. I'm going to forgive myself. I'm going to forgive the other person. This is messy. We didn't get it right. It's not perfect. We can't wrap it up in a nice bow. It's a little messy. And that feminine quality of energy allows us to maneuver through the mess by embracing our humanity, that we are messy beings and things are messy sometimes. And so we learn that through this process of reconnecting to this power center, this second chakra power center. I am dropping into this area. I am owning the full facets of my feminine energy. I'm owning my masculine too, but I'm allowing myself to have my feminine, which historically has been suppressed by the patriarchal dominance of the feminine energy. And we all have that. We've internalized it in some level. My patriarchal internalized energy will beat myself up sometimes. What are you thinking? Are you really going to do that? That was stupid. That's my internalized patriarchy, beating myself up. We call that the monkey mind, the victimizer. There's lots of names for it, the inner critic. But it's an aspect that doesn't allow a part of my feminine to find its way through an experience. It's the perfectionist who wants to get it right and do it right. The feminine is the part that says, let's try. Let's fall down and get ourselves back up again. Let's be open to the possibility and the potential. So as we build that relationship more so to the feminine inside ourselves, we start to explore a whole aspect of your being that has been hidden underneath the shame blanket. And as you tune into it and feel it and sense it and connect to it, you start to find that that shame blanket lessens, it thins. It's not a barrier anymore to your deeper, authentic truth and your deeper, authentic self. So I hope in listening to this that you've been able to sit in your body a little bit differently, maybe dropped in, maybe feeling that connection in your pelvis to that softness and to the softness as power, not necessarily as weakness. But there's power in vulnerability and authenticity and softness and connection in this area. As you connect here to your second chakra power, it will help you develop more authentic connections to other people, connecting internally first here. That also supports you in lifting the barrier, the shame blanket, from accessing this deep power center. I believe it's time for us to heal our second chakras. Other chakras also, we need it everywhere, but this power center historically throughout time is a place that we do need to heal, and we are healing collectively as the feminine continues to rise. So I hope this supports you, and thank you for listening. As always, you can go to my websites. It's wendyderosa.com and schoolofintuitivestudies.com. And I hope this supports you in connecting more deeply to the power that lives in the second chakra area of your body. Many blessings, and until next time.